Hi, and welcome back to Mr. Raymond's Social Studies Academy with a new lesson for our Civics and Government series on the rule of law. This is a new and separate benchmark for those of you who are taking the Civics EOC. Now, we have touched on the rule of law in previous lessons, and it shows up in another benchmark in Unit 3, so you will be very familiar with the concept by the end of the year, and maybe by the end of this video. Today we'll go over the rule of law and how it impacts governmental decisions and the societies ruled by those governments. So let's first look at what we need to know for our exam. We start by defining the rule of law and its influence on the US government. And we will then compare and contrast societies that live under the rule of law with those that don't. We will also examine the relationship between the concept of due process and the impact that the rule of government has on governmental decisions. And just a reminder, teachers of this PowerPoint with a wide variety of materials are available by clicking the link below this video or searching for Mr. Raymond's Social Studies Academy at Teachers Pay Teachers. So, to provide some historical context for today's lesson, many rulers have long, quote-unquote, governed societies where laws don't apply to them, and some still do today. Now, our definition of the rule of law is the restriction of the unchecked use of power by ensuring its use is limited and well-defined by established laws. And that word unchecked is going to mean more to you as you learn all your checks and balances the US has in place. But in this case, unchecked just means that there is not a system in place to limit the power of a leader or government. The impact of the rule of law is the principle that all individuals, including the government, are accountable to the same laws, and that laws are enforced the same regardless of who the individual is. People who live in countries with a well-established system for the rule of law enjoy stability, equality, and justice in their society. So how do experts measure how strong or weak the rule of law is in individual countries? Let's look at the 5 that your exam uses to measure them. We will look at each of these characteristics in more detail, which include accountability to the law, consistent application and enforcement of the law, decisions based on the law, fair procedures, and transparency of institutions. Our first characteristic is accountability to the law. The idea that people and public officials are legally responsible for their actions, and that punishments are imposed if they break the law. Now, you already know that people in the United States and elsewhere do get punished for breaking the law. However, we want to focus more on governmental officials, as we recently saw when a US senator was arrested for taking bribes, including cash and gold bars from foreign governments. Governmental corruption, or those who look to benefit, usually financially, from their positions of power, has existed since the birth of politics, and is still alive and well today. Corruption undermines the rule of law by destroying people's trust and violating the principles of transparency and equality, which are crucial to the rule of law. This leads back to our benchmark, which states that the impact of the United States having a well-established rule of law leads to, quote-unquote, consistent application and enforcement of the law. Now, consistency means the same for everyone. So, consistent application and enforcement of the law implies that all citizens face the same consequences, regardless of who they are. For those of you who follow the news, the mayor of New York City was just indicted or charged with crimes of accepting bribes and working as an agent for foreign governments. Once again demonstrating that the rule of law ensures our elected officials face the same consequences for their actions as quote-unquote ordinary citizens. The justice system or judicial branch is essential in upholding the rule of law. And enforcement agencies such as the local or state police and federal agencies like the FBI and US Marshals must treat all citizens equally. And much of that has to do with due process. Now, we've covered due process before as well, and as I said last time, this concept repeatedly comes up in our course. As I mentioned, we often associate due process with the rights of those accused of committing crimes or civil offenses. The rule of law and due process ensure that legal proceedings, like court cases, are conducted transparently and according to established procedures, which protects individuals from unjust abuses of power. Due process requires that laws and legal proceedings are applied consistently and fairly. The rights to a jury and a lawyer to protect citizens from governmental abuse are prime examples of due process rights. In a nation like the United States, with rights enshrined in our Constitution and Bill of Rights, and an established rule of law system in place, individuals are mostly protected from governmental tyranny. However, in countries ruled by dictatorships, due process is often undermined or non-existent, with legal proceedings or court cases manipulated or not even taking place. This allows a regime like North Korea to punish individuals unfairly. The next impact of the rule of law is that it provides quote-unquote transparency of institutions. Again, transparency means that the people know what is happening and can see what's going on, with institutions like the US Congress, the presidency, the military, and governmental agents like the IRS and FDA allows citizens to access information about governmental decisions. And it gives the people the power to decide which elected officials they will vote for in the next election by being able to see those policies in action. A free press, as defined in the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment, provides citizens with a transparent or open view of governmental actions. A free press provides access to the news and public information and promotes trust, and that trust increases informed civic participation as more people want to get involved in their government. Many countries, however, worldwide lack a free press and have what is called, quote-unquote, state-run media, where the people rely on the government for information. As you can imagine, authoritarian governments manipulate or change the news to deny access to information that they don't want the people to know about. So again, we need to be able to compare nations that do not have a well-established system of rule of law. And we'll look at Russia as an example. Not only does the Russian government have a state-run media, but they will lock up their own reporters who criticize the government. Russia also often locks up foreign journalists on false accusations of spying, as we noted recently when Russia returned a U.S. Wall Street Journal reporter who has been held on false charges. So basically, the impact of a state without transparency means that the people are denied public, unfiltered information. This causes authoritarian governments to, again, just have another lack of check on their abuse of power. And that check would be the people. Now let's look at a word that is guaranteed to be on your exam, and that is tyranny. Tyranny is a cruel and oppressive government or rule, and a tyrant is a leader who rules that way. Another word for tyrant or tyranny is despot or despotism, as used by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. On your exam, you will be tested on your ability to analyze excerpts written back in the 1700s, and knowing your vocabulary will be crucial. A tyrant, despot, dictator, and oppressor all mean the same thing: a ruler with minimal rule of law and limited rights for the people. So again, as we mentioned, you have to be able to compare and contrast the characteristics of a society that operates under the rule of law and one that does not. We've already started, but let's take a deeper look. So what is the impact of governments that lack a rule of law? Well, they often also lack constraints or checks on their power. They're usually high levels of corruption, and they lack transparency or an open government, and often deny their own people rights. Let's look at Venezuela for another example of a nation lacking rule of law. In 2022, Venezuela's president Nicolas Maduro seized control of the legislative and judicial branch, basically leaving himself in charge of the entire government, which obviously violates the norms of separation of powers and, of course, the rule of law. Fortunate to have one of the world's largest oil supplies, Maduro and his predecessor Chavez have appointed friends and supporters into corrupt positions of power, demonstrating their ability to profit from their elite position. Even though freedom of the press is in Venezuela's constitution, President Chavez and now Maduro have cracked down on the media. Political propaganda is aired, and hundreds of newspapers, radio, and television stations have been forced out of business, demonstrating that lack of transparency inside the country. And history has repeatedly shown us the consequences of a state lacking the rule of law, demonstrating how important it is for ensuring freedom and equality in our world. And that's our lesson for today. Be sure to subscribe, because up next we will look at citizenship. But before we do, let's review. What is the concept that nobody is above the law called? Well, it's the title of this thing. The rule of law. That was your easy one. True or false, the purpose of the rule of law is to ensure government officials do not abuse their power. True. Name one of the characteristics used to measure the rule of law. Now, we mentioned 5, and hopefully you took some notes. So, accountability to the law, consistent application and enforcement of the law, decisions based on the law and fair procedures, and transparency of institutions. Name 2 branches of government that play a significant role in ensuring consistent application and enforcement of the law: the judicial and executive branches. And that's it. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to subscribe. And just a reminder, teachers, that this PowerPoint with lesson plan, Kahoot, guided notes, and a whole bunch of more materials are available at Teachers Pay Teachers by clicking the link in the notes below this video or searching for Mr. Raymond's Social Studies Academy. Thanks again, guys.